I want to take you into your new kind of part-time-ish career as an analyst. I spoke to Jackie Hurley, and she said how sorry she had felt for you when the COVID restrictions kept on taking away coaches coming up onto the roof, athletes coming up onto the roof. All of a sudden, it came down to her presenting and you being the expert on pretty much every Olympic sport. How did you find that?
Yeah, it's funny because, and she's right, we had a whole kind of plan in place that we would get more of the support team and the coaches come up to our position. But because of COVID, it couldn't happen. So I actually didn't really know that was going to be my role until day one of the Olympic Games. So to answer your question, if I was told before, David, you're going to be an analyst on all sports, I would have cacked myself. I would have went away and tried to, just learn everything about all sports and have a whole raft of information. So in one way, it worked out pretty well that it was kind of like, oh, this is what I'm doing. It's daunting. For the first day, I was a little bit like, I know nothing about this. Why are they asking me this? But I suppose I grew in confidence that there's a fine line between what you need to know and what you don't really need to know. And it's kind of keeping it to a point where it's understandable for people at home, because people who are watching at home, they're not experts. Yes, there's some people that might be involved in a sport, but generally speaking, people are just watching what's kind of the screen. They're watching the pictures on the TV. So I just tried to kind of link in my own experience of being at Olympic Games. Not make it all about me, but the whole kind of journey of going to the Olympics, the holding hands, life in the village, that stuff doesn't change. So again, it's trying to kind of paint that picture and then just try and do my research. Try and kind of get a couple of nuggets on people who are competing and who they're up against. And I'm fortunate enough some other sports, trying to kind of just get in and learn. Basically, that was it, learn and then bring it back. But yeah, it was daunting. I'm not going to lie, Rob. It was a little bit scary at the start. But Jackie was brilliant, and I think that's really important because she knew how far to go with me. She wasn't going to turn around and go, "Oh, Jack Woolley just did a roundhouse there. What's the technical aspect of that?" I would have. What are you talking about? So again, it's kind of it's that compatibility. It's that knowing what the other person, your co-presenter, knows, and not kind of just throwing them under the bus.
Yeah, you got along great. How many of the little Irish flags had you brought out in your plastic bag?
Well, it wasn't right, we bring home for 20 medals. I'm not really sure why they were there. I think maybe it was more of at the Olympic Games, there's the volunteers and other broadcasters go mad for pins. They go crazy. It's like a currency over there, pins of each country and each kind of broadcaster. And I don't know why RT decided to bring these little tricolours, but they were sitting there, and because of bad weather, we were in the studio in the IBC one day, and that's where I was like, right, I'm going to stick this up here. And then, unfortunately, Jackie moved back to the other position, and we forgot the flags. We still only had the one. So, to answer your question, I brought 15, hoping we'd get 15 medals, Rob.
That was nicely optimistic. When you went back, when you came down off of the shopping centre roof and you went out to the stadium, the logistics of travelling around Tokyo were pretty difficult, is what we've heard from times. How long did it take you? And were there any kind of hairy moments when you thought, Jesus, I'm not going to make it?
Oh, yeah, so basically there was media transport, but because of COVID, everything was kind of restricted, and they all operate back from the IBC. So from our location for our live position wasn't on that route, so we couldn't get the media transport to where we needed to go. So we had taxis basically that were kind of assigned to us, and that was kind of our lift back to the IBC or else to a venue. And the whole logistical thing is huge. Everything is planned 2 or 3 days in advance, because you just need to know these things, and you always have to factor in athletes getting through. So we had athletes getting through to finals, even though realistically they may not get to a final, but it's sport, you never know. So you have to plan all of that sort of stuff. So there was a few moments where you'd be looking at your watch going, and because I was on the second week in the stadium, just 2 sessions, So you know what I mean. You finish the morning session, and you might get out and get back to your hotel, but then you got to get back again to the stadium. And then with like Tokyo is a very busy place, so traffic and all that has to be factored in. So there was a few moments where I was stuck at security. So even though like there was no spectators, there was security outside the stadium, and you have to obviously like airport security. Everything comes off. And there was one particular day, and no offense to cameraman, but I was stuck beside this cameraman, and he had lenses, he had flipping tripods and cameras. He took an eternity to get in. I'm looking at my watch, going, I need to get to position straight away. You know, panicking. And it's not a great place, Tokyo, to start panicking because it's very, very hot. So the perspiration and all the rest of it. But yeah, like the whole logistic thing is, it's another city. Like that's the thing. It's another, like the organization into it was absolutely colossal, both from an RTE perspective, but even from a general perspective. And I think sometimes you don't really grasp that when you're watching from home. Like it's so big. It's huge. And one way I actually kind of felt sorry for them all because they put all this great infrastructure in place. Like the stadium was fantastic, and then you look at the merchandise little kind of hut and it's closed and there's no spectators, and you kind of you feel for them because like from my perspective it was a very, very good Olympics. Like everything was finished. You know, you turn up at the stadiums, the venues, they were all like really well maintained, finished to the highest quality, and then there's no spectators there, and that was sad, I think.
Yeah, last one for me. I know, like in the day job, you work with well-being and in the kind of the psychological side of it. And I think you did a course in sports psychology, a professional kind of qualification in that. When you're doing the interviews post-race, there's always a very human kind of a feel to it. They're non-technical. It's not about what time you did there. There's a real kind of softer side to it, and sometimes that makes it very raw. I remember you did an interview with Sarah Healy just after she had, failed to qualify out of hers. And, she's young, first Olympics. She was tough on herself. How do you prepare, or how do you cope with those when an athlete is obviously bearing his or her soul to you?
Yeah, and you know what? It's a really good question, and I'm kind of glad you asked it because like when I first did my first couple of trackside interviews, in preparation, I'd have a load of questions. I'd have them all written down, and then you'd watch the race and it could go the complete other way. And I remember I was over at a European indoors, and Phil Jones at the time was still working for BBC. He's now since retired, but Phil Jones was someone that interviewed me, sometimes with the BBC. And I remember kind of going like, "Oh, Phil, like any advice?" And he said to me, "Don't prepare." And I remember thinking, don't prepare. And he said, exact same thing. He had prepared, and then an athlete would false start, or an athlete would or even athlete could win, and you haven't prepared for that. So, when you mentioned Sarah there, like, I suppose the benefit that I have is that I'm trackside, and I can see straight away their initial response when they cross that line. And that tells you an awful lot. That tells you initially their reaction to their performance. And straight away, I could see Sarah was a little bit overwhelmed. She was a little bit, she almost didn't know what to do after the race. And as she walked through the mix on, I could see kind of the raw emotion on her face. And that was just how it played, and it was kind of a case of like, and obviously I know Sarah's background. I know kind of it was her first Olympics and things like that. And, straight away, time-wise, I can gauge where she was. And, it's kind of like, I just try and kind of make it comfortable for them, because I suppose, Rob, I've been in those situations where you come off the track and sometimes the last thing you want to do is talk about what just happened. And, they're not talking to me, they're talking to the nation. And I just try and make it as kind of comfortable as possible. And, sometimes I can see them kind of beginning to well up a little bit more. And if that's the case, I'm not going to hold them longer than I need to hold them. Like, they don't want to cry on national TV. So I don't want to kind of give them the opportunity to put them in a situation where they don't want to be. And it's just trying to empathize with them, really, and give them the opportunity to tell their side, and try and reassure them that like they haven't let anyone down. And I think that's something I kind of felt with a lot of our athletes. And maybe I kind of felt this year as well. The athletes were a lot more emotional in the mix zone than previous championships. And maybe it was the added year, and, the whole world has changed. There was a lot more doom and gloom over the last 2 years, and maybe like their family and friends weren't there as well, and for a lot of our younger athletes, they're very used to their athletes or their coaches being with them. So for someone like Sarah, it's probably one of the first major championships she's been to where her coach wasn't there. So again, you know, there's no kind of trusting ear or that someone to confide in, and then next minute there's me kind of throwing the microphone in their face. So again, I just try and manage it and kind of go with the flow. If they're talking and if they're willing to kind of keep talking, I'll keep them there. But if they're not, you kind of let them go. You know, there's no need to keep them there longer than they want to be.
Okay, did a great job of it anyway. Thanks a million.
I appreciate that, Rob. Thank you.